Weak men judge people. Strong men accept people and welcome everybody.
Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Ascendancy podcast. My name is Chris.
I'm Austin.
As you can see, we have a guest again on the Ascendancy podcast. That's really awesome to have Jérémie on today. For those who don't know, I'll read from his autobiography here. So, a dreamer and a rebel, Jérémie struggled to find his place in a world built on conformity and a lack of reflection. When he discovered that animals too were forgotten, abused, and crushed, he became vegan. Since 2013, he has dedicated his life to helping free them. That's his dream and mission, freeing the animals. Even the smallest person can change the course of the world, and he deeply believes that we all have the power to change the course of history. So Jérémie is a vegan activist and educator. He's the author of the book series Freeing the Animals and runs a vegan publishing house. I personally first found Jérémie through social media when one of his impactful book quotes was shared by AV co-founder Paul Bashir on his Instagram story. And I really liked what I was seeing from his work, from his books. And from there, we've been friendly, interacting ever since. And it's really a real pleasure to have you today, Jérémie, on the Ascendancy podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, guys. The pleasure is mine.
Hey, Jérémie, it's an honor to have you here and to interview you. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to learning more about you and your work. And to begin, what is your vegan story? Like, what awakened you to reject the exploitation of animals?
Sure. So, my vegan story is a story of a conversation that I had with a friend. And we were talking, and he said to me, "Do you think that animals are free?" And I said to him, "Free? But what do you mean?" And he said, "Do you think animals decide themselves to go into 4 barriers, to enter in the slaughterhouse by themselves?" And in my head, in that moment, I didn't knew what to respond to that. I made a trip on nature in Spain, in the south of Spain, and during that time, I walked 300, 400 kilometers. And in this time, on the nature, with the stars, with the silence, with the sun, with the sea, I was sleeping alone outside. I think about this question. And at the end of the trip, I was vegan.
Wow. So you really pondered on that question, that thought for an extended time, and you came to that realization just through that without necessarily seeing like footage of what happens. It was just that thought process that led you there.
Yeah, it was a thought process, and directly right after I became vegan, I said to myself, it's great that I am vegan. I understand now that animals, there is no way that we can exploit animals in a respectful way, and I directly start to talk to people and to help them discover what I had discovered.
I mean, that's truly incredible, and I think that's a mark of a brilliant mind. And we've seen some of the greatest thinkers throughout human history, independently and through different ages and eras and times, come to the same conclusions through critical thought on their own. Like Pythagoras comes to mind, for example, who may not exactly have been vegan. I'm not 100% sure, but from his literature, it seems that he was at least thinking in accordance much more similarly to someone who would view animals who's a vegan today, than anyone else in the past. And that really brings me to the next question, which is, I think, quite a contrast from the way that you perceive things. But in your perspective, what do you think is the primary psychological condition or belief that allows people to justify animal exploitation? And to follow that, how do we go about collapsing this belief?
Absolutely. This is a great question. Thank you for asking. The root cause of animal exploitation for me is very clear. It's speciesism. We are educated to believe that animals exist for us since we are child. What is interesting actually is to understand that when we are very, very young, we don't necessarily make this difference between human and other animals. When we see a dog, when we see a cat, when we see a cow, we think them as member of our family. And it's only after 3, 4 years in the society that we start to accept in our brain this idea that there is a radical division between human in one side and animals on the other side. It's in this moment when everything starts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the greatest factors, and I agree with you for the vast majority of people, or at least a majority, that that's a primary driver in being indoctrinated to see animals as different from people. And as you know, notably in one episode, Chris and I touched on the subject of what we think like the core issue is.
Sure.
And we came to this understanding that it's this predatory drive to
Mhm.
think that it's okay to prey on and dominate, oppress other beings, you know, human or animals. And I think that for most people, I think speciesism really is what it comes down to. And I wonder if, you know, we can eliminate speciesism, eliminate this arbitrary differentiation between the treatment of animals and humans, how much of this problem we will eliminate. I think most likely it will be the vast majority of it. Of course, there's always people, and this is something we can talk about a bit later as well. But in my perspective, there's always going to be some people who are a little bit more sadistic, a bit more predatory. So even when we eliminate, you know, one aspect like of speciesism per se, we can still have some predatory behavior. But I would say overall across the human race, if you eliminate speciesism, you make it so that it's a problem of outliers more so than a worldwide problem. I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Your video, guys. I have watched it, and it's very interesting because it has forced me to think about that and to really justify and to understand is speciesism the real cause of animal exploitation. And this is very interesting because I came along this reflection that for making an act of violence toward somebody, you have first to authorize yourself to do it. If you not reduce the person that you will make violence to into a category where the person is inferior than you can't even do the slightest violence possible. Violence, in fact, is only possible, and this is my theory, violence is only possible when you first said in your head that the person you will act violently toward is inferior, that animals have less value than us. It's a moral discrimination. We think that they are inferior. And it's because they are inferior that we can exploit them. But if we don't think that they are inferior, if we reject speciesism, so they are equal, and you can't do anything about somebody that you consider as you equal.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. And I think it really, when you look at it that way, when you consider that the animals that humans so ruthlessly exploit and dominate are subjects of a life, you know, they have sentience, they have autonomy, they have their own wills and desires to live, to enjoy their life, to be with their families, and to not be slaughtered. When you really see that they have a lot more in common with us than not, then how can you continue to accept their exploitation and domination. When you see that they share more in common with us than not, it becomes just the inevitable consequence to allow them into, our circle of decency and respect. But one thing that people sometimes will say is that, I don't think humans and animals are equal, so
Sure.
I'm not going vegan. And one thing me and Austin have touched on is, some people, they might have that view, but that's compatible with living a vegan lifestyle. I don't want to say lifestyle because it makes
Sure.
it seem like it's a hippy dippy trend, but
Sure.
to live vegan, right?
Sure.
Someone can have that view and it's compatible with being vegan, because at the end of the day, if someone's consuming animals in their flesh for convenience, habit, taste, pleasure, it's obviously not for nutrition, because we know plant-based diet can cover all your needs if it's planned properly. We're weighing that against the animal's existence and their right to life as well. So it's not like you're choosing between your own life versus a cow's life. You're choosing your convenience, your habit, your taste, pleasure over that being's life. So you can maintain the view that if you value humans more than animals, and then still be vegan. It's the same way, like, if I value the life of my family member, more than a stranger on the street, like, I can have that view, but it doesn't mean I have the right to oppress that stranger or exploit them. That's the way I kind of see it. What do you guys think about those ideas?
Yeah, I totally understand what you say. And it's true that when you look at the writing of Leslie J. Cross, he didn't mention anything about equality, right? So is it because he didn't mention that we shouldn't say that veganism is not about equality? I am absolutely not sure why. Because imagine 1 second the movement for ending the slavery of black people, who would say, we have to stop enslaving black people, but don't worry, guys. If you still want to see them as inferior as white, it's okay. We are just ending black slavery, but not our consideration of the moral view that we have on black. It will be absolutely crazy to say that. So, of course, veganism must rely on the idea that we see animals and humans as equal. Because think about that, guys. Otherwise, if we don't think that, we are just saying that humans are morally superior than animals. And it's precisely the root reason why we exploit animals in the first place. So we have to stop this idea of human being superior, morally superior to animals. That doesn't mean, as you say, and you have make a great example, that, for example, you consider your family as you have a preference for your family than a stranger, and that's perfectly acceptable because it's an emotional preference. You are not saying that your family is morally superior than a stranger, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But when it comes to thinking that we are morally superior than another person, we have to justify that. And up to now, the only justification that we have for saying that humans are superior and morally superior to animals is the species. But is the species a moral criteria, a relevant moral criteria for saying that humans are morally superior to animals? I don't think so. And if we think that, we are bluntly and purely speciesist.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, and I think I understand your perspective, especially with doing activism. You get a lot of people like just saying, oh, well, they're animals, they don't have the same moral value as humans, and they use that as their specific excuse to dominate animals, prey on them, exploit them, etc. And one thing that I just want to entertain, like just putting it out there with my perspective, is that the reason, why I'm vegan specifically isn't so much that I view animals and humans as the same. And frankly, I don't view any two humans as the same, even in terms of moral value or any subjective capacity that I value, but more so because I'm against exploitation. I'm against dominating others, preying on others, like regardless of any attribute. So like I think that exploiting a being or preying on enslaving a being, I think those are things. The principle of them is wrong, regardless of any attribute of the victim. So like let's say hypothetically a non-vegan isn't a speciesist. Like let's say they say, "Oh, I don't see species," but then they say, "But I see intellect," for example. Then they say, "Oh, animals are less intelligent than people, therefore I can exploit and dominate them." And then I would then say in this scenario, well, okay, you say you're not a speciesist, and you say that you're, let's say, an intellectualist. Perhaps I made up a word there, but I would say this act of exploiting and dominating others remains wrong, regardless of which trait or which attribute that you would use to prey on them.
Absolutely. And this is very interesting because speciesism is the idea that animals matter less morally. But there is many arguments for saying that they matter less. Speciesism is the base, the species. But after you can talk about intelligence, you can talk about many moral, many physical capacity, mental capacity. All, all of that can be in the frame of speciesism. Speciesism is the basic idea that we can devalue the life of someone because he is not the same species. But after that, you have many branches that uh, uh, try as an excuse to say he's not the same than me. But I just want to bounce on something you say. You say that you don't think that someone is morally equal than me, or I don't remember what you say about your vision of other people.
Yeah, I don't view any two people or any two animals or any two
Yeah.
individuals as morally equal
Okay.
because different beings have different degrees of moral agency. They use that moral agency and behave in vastly different ways. So, for example, I wouldn't say like someone who preys on innocent animals and humans would be like morally equivalent to someone who devotes their life to fighting those things. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that I understand your point, but in that moment, it's a very sleepy, uh, it's very
Slippery
dangerous.
slope.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
dangerous ground because we think we say that people have value only because they would act in a certain way. And this is going down with utilitarianism. And this is very dangerous world. Meanwhile, if you say that if someone is an individual, then automatically he has the same values than you. No matter if he kills someone, if he rapes someone, if he eats animals, with the moral value of someone is inherent because you are not a plant, you are not a rock, you are not a mountain,
You guys are, can you
you
hear me?
are an individual. What?
Yeah, I hear you. I think your
Mhm.
connection might have dropped.
Mhm.
Oh, the connection was dropping?
Yeah,
Hey, Jeremy, Chris, can you hear me?
he's reconnecting. Yeah, it says you're reconnecting right now.
But this
It's
is a very,
interesting.
very interesting topic, and there is definitely a lot of myths to destroy here. I understand absolutely where you're coming from, guys, because I think I'm more or less the same, right? And I have also questioned myself about that. But for perpetuating any kind of violence towards somebody, you have to devalorize, to think that this person is inferior than you, because you can't make violence towards someone that you consider as your equal. It's impossible. For making violence to someone, it's absolutely necessary to say this person have a value lesser than me. But I don't want to. I don't want you to force my opinion on you. It takes time, and obviously it's not something that we have to be agree on the spot, because it's a very deep, and you have to think about that very deeply about that, right?
Yeah, I think to some extent there's confusion created in how people interpret the word equal, because
Also.
yeah, that's where there's confusion. I think we see the same way on this. It's, if you look at it strictly logically, like Austin said in a previous episode, two entities can only be identical in like math and like in those kinds of ways. Like, for example, me and you are not equal in our genetics, in our height, in our abilities athletically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So people will construe equality in what, you know what I mean? So that's where confusion maybe comes up with this kind of conversation.
Absolutely,
You know
and that's why it's important in conversation that when somebody say to you, so are you saying that animals are equal to human? And what you can respond is definitely not saying, oh no, don't mind, I am not saying that animals are still inferior. No. It's the worst response that we can do, and every vegan are doing that. I see every vegan falling on that trap, and it's very, very dangerous. The response that I suggest is very simple. When someone say you that, you just say, you are definitely right. We are completely different in many things. We have different intelligence. Cows will never go to the moon. You are completely right. But we are equal in the fact that we want to be free. We have the same interest to be free. Are you agreeing with that? And when you go in that direction, the person will say, yeah, I can definitely agreeing with you on that point. And then you can continue the conversation, you know?
Yeah, I understand.
What I was telling you, Austin, is that you can consider, for example, someone as inferior in the fact that they, for example, they have do bad things. Maybe you can consider that subjectively, but it's only subjective. It's only an opinion. The reality of moral, of ethics, if we take a deontological framework, is that if you are an individual, if you are a person, necessarily you are not superior, not inferior than somebody else. Your moral worth, I mean. Not the fact that you are more intelligent or more, I don't know what, but the moral worth of someone cannot be changed by the fact that you do good things or bad things. It doesn't work like that, actually, right? We can think that in a subjective way. I am agree with you. But in terms of moral, of a deontological framework, all individuals are equal. And if they are not morally equal, we have to say why. And that's where we can break our teeth, because we have no justification for saying that somebody is inferior than somebody else. And think about that. In all history, all the injustice have always start with someone who say, these people are inferior than me. Jews, they are inferior than me. Blacks, they are inferior than me. Their life doesn't matter. Every time you say that someone is lesser morally than you, you create the condition for an endless cycle of violence.
I'll share my perspective on this, and it's interesting to hear what you say in your perspective too. When we look at these historical injustices, we do see a dominant group, a stronger group, a more powerful group, saying these other individuals don't belong to that group or they're
Absolutely.
inferior, and use that as an excuse to prey. So in modern times, though, like let's say we look at homicide, let's say we look at murder. Most murders are done by people who are the same, like or similar. Like in the United States, for example, it's well known globally that we have a huge problem with gun violence, with murder. But most of the murder that's happening in our country is 18 to 30-year-old black men killing other 18 to 30-year-old black men. And we have a big problem of murder even among every racial group, and the people who they're most likely to murder are their own family, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at, say, interpersonal violence, we do see a lot between people who are similar, and it's not so much that they view themselves as superior to the person that they're killing, but it's, I think, maybe it has more to do with this predatory drive, like this anger, violence, desire to harm others. And for example, in the United States, we have a big problem with mass shooting too. And oftentimes with these mass shootings, it's not so much that the person who does a shooting views themselves as superior to the people they're shooting. It seems oftentimes these are people who feel defeated or rejected or ostracized by one group, and they want to get revenge. We have a big epidemic of transgender people doing mass shootings in the United States. And I don't think these transgender people see themselves as superior
Sure.
to children or to teachers or staff. I think it's more like they feel rejected by society and they're lashing out. And I do have a serious concern when it comes to people and how humans interact with and treat animals, that let's say we eliminate the speciesism. I think some subset of humans, and I think it could be a large subset of humans, are predatory, and they're predatory to people who are just like themselves. So even if you remove the speciesism, because animals are smaller, weaker, vulnerable, I still think they could prey on them. So I do see the historical precedents for viewing equality as a strong foundation, but I do have a criticism of this because, from my perspective of the world, I see a huge amount of violence. In fact, right now, the majority of violence by people who are just like each other. Like when we see
I
Russia
understand your point.
versus Ukraine, these are people who share a culture, a lineage, a history, most of their language, and they're killing each other, they're invading their country, and it's not because one is white and one is black or something like this.
Not
So
necessarily, but that doesn't have to be. In fact, the deep questions we have to ask is how we can be violent towards someone if we consider the person as our equal.
I still see this happening though. Like I still see, people who are the most like another person based on all these metrics are still
Yeah,
killing each other.
yeah, but
So
it's not because they are like the other person. They cannot consider the other person like in an inferior way. It's not because I am white and you are white, Austin, that I cannot consider you as inferior. It doesn't have a relation with what you look like. You can have many criteria for saying that someone is inferior. You said it before in the conversation. You said it, if someone is maybe killing somebody, I will not say that he is equal than me. So maybe your criteria is the way we act, okay? But maybe he is white, so you are not racist, but you are still thinking that he is morally inferior because of another criteria, right? But I don't want to say that you can be violent toward this person. But the question is how we can be violent towards somebody if we consider this person as equal. Think about that deeply. It takes time. But I can assure you that it's impossible. You cannot be violent towards somebody when you look at the person as your equal, no matter if he is white, black, an animal or not. The root cause that permits the violence is because you will say my interest to benefit from this person or my interest to abuse this person is more important than their interest. And that's where it begins. It doesn't have to be the species, the color of the skin, or it's just this idea that we are superior or inferior. But it's a long process to think. I don't want to convince you right now. I have explained that in the book more precisely, and thank you guys for this video because it has led me to precise my theory about how it is possible to be violent in general, how violence is possible in our society. So it's very interesting. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, certainly. And one more thing I want to touch on. I really do appreciate you sharing your perspective on this because it does give me, food for thought. And my thoughts aren't set in stone, right? I'm open to hearing new ideas, but it's something I've thought about a bit too. And like, let's say hypothetically that I don't view all beings as equal, and I don't view all beings as morally equal. So then the question is, why don't I prey on animals? Why don't I prey on other people? And it's because I view the actions that are predatory themselves as wrong. So I don't let my actions and my moral framework rest on a feeling. Like I feel superior to someone else, I'm going to harm them. I do have a deontological framework, and that's do not harm others, do not prey on others, do not, treat others. And I don't want to so much say this, but in a way, I think that's, the golden rule. I don't want to treat others how I wouldn't want to be treated. Obviously, that has its own ethical ramifications. So I'm using this in like a loose way, you know. But I view veganism as like such a concrete framework that even if people have internal biases, subjective biases, that they're not going to violate it, because of the strong foundation, not so much because of how they view themselves relative to others. Does that make sense?
It makes totally sense, and I want to respond to you that up to the point that you don't consider every individual, no matter whether they are animals, black people, women, no matter what, you will always have the possibility to be violent towards them. Even you, Austin. It's only when you really think that we are not superior and we are absolutely morally equal, not intellectually, we have different capacity, but it's not the point. It's only when you think that we are morally equal that the peace on earth can be built. Otherwise, there will be always a risk that violence came back. I can assure you that if you think that somebody is inferior morally than you, there is a risk that the violence came back. So maybe now, Austin, you will not necessarily be violent toward anybody, and I believe you. But if you might think that someone is inferior than you, whether it is an ant, a horse, or another human, there will be always a risk in the future for violence. And think about that also, it's not you, because you will inspire people and you will say to them, you will say to your son, you will say to your friend, oh, these people, they are inferior than me, or this people is inferior than me. How is that possible to say that? How is that possible to build a peaceful society when we just even think that there is someone who is inferior morally than us?
I agree with everything you said. I actually agree with 100% of everything you just said. The only thing though that I think in this world is that there are people with competing ideas, competing values, people who, let's say, they don't have my ethical framework, and they do view themselves as superior to others. We're left in this world where these people will clash and compete, and we can have this idea, Oh, and just by the way, I want to understand you fully. Sorry. Are you a pacifist by any chance, or would you consider yourself to be a pacifist, like
What do you
against
mean
all sort of?
What do you mean
Like,
by
would
that?
you say you're against all war, all violence, all
No,
interpersonal
absolutely
conflict?
not. Self-defense is a very legitimate form of violence. Of course, it would be crazy to say that violence is always wrong. Of course, violence is justified in case of self-defense. Absolutely.
Okay. So that adds a lot more nuance to my perspective of your perspective then, I will say, because from what you were relaying, I was getting the impression that you're a pacifist. So you do think there should be a boundary to that when it comes to self-defense. Okay, I agree with that. I mean, I'm wondering if we should expand on our perspectives like even more. I mean, because I can say from what Jeremy said, I agree with him. And I can see how in a lot of cases that subjective feeling of superiority or inferiority can potentially lead to violence.
Mm.
Um, but I think here's how we're going to differ. And we do have another question planned, and I think, Chris, this is your question. I think this really highlights like what I'm about to say, and I think where this goes is that I do think that violence is acceptable. I'm absolutely not a pacifist. I would say I'm even for capital punishment. So I think there are people who are irredeemable. I think there are people who are psychologically disturbed to the point where they shouldn't exist, where they no longer deserve to exist. I've encountered many of these people firsthand, getting death threats myself, having people threaten to rape my female family members. So I do think that there's a level of evil that exists in the world that needs to be cast out. So yeah, I would say that I am okay with saying that there are some beings who are morally superior and morally inferior based on their actions, and that they would create a basis for violence based on that. But I will say this, I view veganism as essentially the safeguards on violence. Veganism is the confines in which violence can happen. For example, you can't prey on, exploit, dominate those who are innocent, those who are vulnerable, animals. But two people, I think, absolutely can and should use violence to defend themselves and their loved ones. And I think that the moral significance of that is a factor. So if you want to lay out your ideas, and before you even go there, Chris, you did have a question to him that can help clarify his perspective. Even before he responds to that, what do you think?
Yeah, the question is hand in hand with what you said, Austin. Jeremy, what do you think? Do you think there's only bad ideas and bad actions and not bad people? Is that something we saw from a document you shared with
Yeah.
us? Do you think that all people are inherently good, or do you think, as Austin and I kind of think that there are some people that are inherently bad? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a very great question. Thank you for asking. So there is two things that I want to respond, you, Austin, and you, Chris. But in fact, responding to you, Chris, we can more easily after respond to you, Austin. So of course, there is people who do bad things. Of course, there is people who have bad ideas. We were one of these people, and we can still be one of these people. When we weren't vegan, we were exploiting animals, we were murdering animals, right? So in that time, Chris, Austin, do you think that we were bad person?
I would say personally, I was. I remember when I was in university, there are these people who are Mormon missionaries. They have a religion and they go around asking people questions. It sort of seems like a sales type of pitch. And a person responds and then they sort of lead it to their religion. One of the questions that they asked me was, "Are you a good person?" And I strived to be a good person. I thought I was a good person, but in this time, something about my actions in my life felt off. And I didn't know what it was at this time, but I couldn't truthfully say that I was a good person despite, striving to be one. And, once I went vegan, I reflected back on that and I reflected on how I was living in this veil of ignorance as far as how my actions impact animals. And I realized that was a reason why I couldn't view myself fully as a good
Okay.
person. I didn't realize it so much consciously, but subconsciously. But I will say this, is every non-vegan a bad person? I would say their actions are bad and they may not potentially be a bad person. I will give you that, but I will say also that the way that a person responds to this vegan message sort of reveals as to whether or not they're like a good or a bad person. For example, the day that I learned what veganism is, I went vegan. You learned about veganism and you reflected on it and you went vegan. There are other people who understand what veganism is, and then they will kill an animal themselves and then send the videos to vegan activists to try to emotionally harm them. So I wouldn't say those are good people. Obviously, their actions are bad.
It's here where you make a mistake, if I can permit me. Because we have to understand that doing wrong doesn't mean that we are wrong. We have to understand, first of all, that for the animals, you weren't a bad person, Austin. When you were not vegan, you weren't a bad person. You was just a conditioned person. You was indoctrinated into the believing that it's normal to exploit animals. It's okay. It's okay to see animals as different than human. You have been brainwashed, like me, like you, Chris, to think about that. So you was not consciously making the decision to exploit animals. You was doing that because you have learned to do that without questioning it. So you were not a bad person, right? So it's very important to understand that there is two things. There is bad action which are based on our cultural education, and bad action who are based on our inner nature. For example, there is many things natural inside us that tends to be bad, right? There is a capacity of human to be violent naturally, even beyond cultural education, which is present in our inner self, right? And there is also cultural violence, the violence that we learn, speciesism, how the fact that we exploit animals, right? So when we say that someone is a bad person, we are just capturing a precise moment of his action and his ideas, whether it is cultural or natural, and we put the stickers on his skin and we say, you are a bad person. When we say that, we crystallize forever the fact that this person will never change. Because how can a person change if you don't trust the person? If you say to him, you are a bad person, I am different than you. This is the really base of violence. It's when we think that we are different than us morally. Again, we come back to the equality, right? So it's very, very important to understand, to separate between ideas and action from one side and people from the other side. That means, I will just tell you I will just tell you a story, and after I give you the time to respond. One thing that I have loved one time is the story of Jean Paul II. It was a pope. I don't know. Yeah,
Pope John Paul II, Pope.
yeah. And this is a very interesting story, guys, because this man was celebrating something in the street, and there were thousands of people around him who was applauding him, right? Oh, there
We
is
lost Chris.
we
We
lost
lost
Chris.
Chris. Let's wait for him to rejoin and then
Yeah, Sure.
Because I want to apologize to you. I don't mean to be hostile. I like you, think you're a cool dude. Sometimes I get a bit passionate about subjects.
Sure, no problem, Austin, no problem. I am passionate too because this man was celebrating on the street. I don't remember what it was, and there was people who was applauding him. And in the crowd, there was one man who was not applauding him. And this one man take a rifle and shoot Jean-Paul II like that. Pa! One bullet in his body. And you know what? Jean-Paul II survived. And what Jean-Paul II do after that? He went in prison. Enter in the room where there was his killer and take the killer in his arms. I think this story is incredible. Because when someone is taking a rifle and shooting you, and you go and you take him in the arm, I think that it's the beautifulest, and there is no other way to symbolize what peace must be in the world. Because in this time, Jean-Paul II have not forget, but he say, you have done something bad, but I will not reject you as a person because I have still hope in you and I still believe in your worth as a person. I think this story is incredible.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Chris, did you want to comment or do you have something to say?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never heard that piece of history that happened. It shows this difference in the way humans look at morality and life in general. You have some that do truly think that they're inherently bad people, and then you have others who are hopeful that people can change, who see a wounded, inner child, if you will, a wounded person who can be corrected or changed to be good. I guess it's a deep subject that people can see the same situation so differently because, yeah, I'm sure most people would, given the choice, they would not show forgiveness for their assailant or the killer of a family member or something. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really inspiring story. And I think as a pope, I think the story of Jesus and Jesus's compassion for people must really strongly resonate, within him. I have another story that I was just recently thinking about that's a bit different, goes in a bit of a different direction. But in 1996 in Arkansas, a man broke into a woman's home and brutally murdered her. Her daughter survived this attack, and after around 20 years, this man who did the murder was released from prison. He supposedly reformed. He improved himself and turned his life around in prison, where he reflected on the morality of this. And the woman whose mother that he killed actually, kept in touch with him and saw how he was changing and saw how he was turning his life around. She actually employed him and then had him work for him. I believe it was in a bed and breakfast. I can't say 100% sure. And shortly after that, he then murdered her as well. So on some level, I don't know if everyone can potentially be a good person. My perspective of humans is that, morally speaking, I think humans have a predatory drive. I think if we behave in a way that's completely aligned with the nature of our psychology, people will be quite cruel and quite predatory. And I think it's to varying degrees amongst different people. So, from the perspective of law, from a legal framework, sure, we should judge people based on their actions, not by something internal, but I do think that a person's actions informs what kind of a person they are morally. And on top of this, let's say everyone lives in complete ignorance on the subject of veganism, or they've been indoctrinated by their parents, their friends, by advertisements on television, by billboards at restaurants, by the rodeo and by the zoo, and by everything going on around them, by people wearing leather jackets, and they come to see animals as objects, right? But then we show people the truth of what animal exploitation looks like. We show them what happens in the slaughterhouse. We tell them about veganism and we make the ethical case for it and we do the best that we can. And with all of this information and seeing the truth, not only do these people not go vegan, but they themselves devote their lives to attacking the concept of veganism despite being highly aware of it. Where are these people left morally? Are they good or morally neutral people doing bad things? Or maybe these are quite bad people. I would lean into saying that these are actually bad people.
Yeah, it's easy to think that, but it's again, it's a big mistake for me because when you say that, you are just judging the situation from your point of view, Austin. Austin, you have changed quickly. Chris, you have changed maybe more quickly than other people. Maybe me, I have changed more quickly. But we have to understand first that we have not the same level of intelligence. First, we are not the same in intelligence. Second, we don't have to underestimate the power of our speciesist indoctrination. You have rejected that, okay, you have changed, but we don't have to discard this. This is very important because our conditioning, we are not conditioned in the same way. We are not conditioned in the same way. So we cannot expect people to change like that because we show them footage and we show them what is veganism. It doesn't work like that. For people to change, they have to understand why it is wrong, why speciesism is wrong, why animal exploitation is wrong. Some people change rapidly, some doesn't. And it's not because they take a longer time that there are bad people. Whenever, again, you think that there are bad people, you create the condition for them to never change. People change when you trust them, when you tell them the truth and you trust them. If you don't trust them, you can directly make a war with them. If you want to build a wall and create a society just with vegans and with good people, and there is the bad people outside, think about that. All the history of violence in the world is the same history, is people who say, I am better than you. I am more ethical than you. Everybody says that. Everybody says that. The strength of a man, the strength of a human is to say, you have made a bad action, you have bad ideas, but I will treat you in a kind way because I recognize that you have a worth, an inner worth that I cannot change. You have this inner value that I cannot change. But I don't accept your action and I will oppose with all my strength to what you do, but I will always accept you in my circle of consideration. And just one thing, if I can permit me, one story, very quick. There is this story, very interesting, Austin and Chris, of a man who was talking with a neo, and he go with this group of neo and start to talk and questioned them. I think he was black, if I remember well the story. This man was black, and he was talking to them. Maybe I am wrong, maybe he was white, but he was talking to them, and discussion after discussion, conversation after conversation, they realized at one point that black people were not inferior, were not all they think there was, and he made a lot of change. People who were neo-Nazi, and maybe you, Austin, you would have said, oh, there are scumbag. They will never change. Fuck them. Okay, great. But if you say that, they will never change. But this man goes and talks to them. He takes the time, discussion after discussion, and guess what? Maybe he don't have a 100% success rate to make them change and quit racism, but there is some of these people where he talked to, they stop being racist, and they take black people in their arm after that. That's the power of trusting people. Weak men judge people. Strong men accept people and welcome everybody.
I actually remember watching a YouTube video about it, and yeah, you recalled it correctly the first time. And I think as vegan activists, that's essentially what we do. You know, we look at all the people who can potentially walk by us when you do a cube of truth with AV or what have you, and we know they're non-vegan, but we give them the benefit of the doubt. So yeah, I think that is an important thing to give people the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to change. You know, that's what we're all about. That's what we're all doing. That's what we strive to do, is to reach to these people, you know, where they are, and to give them the best possible opportunity to change their actions. So yeah, I think when it comes to activism, absolutely, we need to act and behave in good faith, right? Always in good faith, always with the idea that this person will change, right? So no, I agree. I do agree with that, and I do think the way that we conduct ourselves ought to reflect that too. I mean, I guess the last thing I do want to say on this, and the last point of disagreement that I do have, you know, is that even when I think there are some people out there who, even when you will explain to them how speciesism is wrong, for example, or how they shouldn't prey on or dominate or exploit animals, and you use the truth of the reality of animal exploitation, you combat it with logic and with facts and with rationale, and you get them to fully understand. And I can even share a personal story that informed my perspective on this as well. And this is something that I haven't shared publicly, but I had a friend growing up in high school and in university, and this guy was an exceptionally intelligent individual, easily the smartest person I've ever met. I don't want to discuss where his education is or what field he's in, but I'll say this: to even get into the field and the university that he's in, he has to be somewhere in like the top 0.1%, you know, as far as intelligence. He studied philosophy at a high level as one of his degrees, not his only degree, just one of the bachelors that he got. Extremely bright person, right? After a long time, I got this friend of mine who was my university roommate and high school friend to go vegan. We had very high level conversations about veganism. He understood it to a T. And not only did he understand veganism at a very high level, but he also drew parallels between veganism and other injustices that I haven't made before, and I haven't heard other people make before either. So he was someone with a very deep understanding of philosophy as a whole, of Kantian ethics, deontological ethics, of veganism, of animal rights. He was vegan, or he claimed to be vegan for 2 years. So in 2 years, he would go to vegan restaurants with me. We would talk about this subject. We would talk about it in the philosophical way, broadening our understanding. And after all of this, I find that he is an ex-vegan, and
Okay.
I can't think of a person who could be more informed, more knowledgeable,
Mhm.
or more intelligent and still go back. And this is after seeing all of the footage, seeing it for himself, hearing the greatest activists speak about this subject. I really went all out in educating him on this subject. And even he reverted to non-veganism. And the only thing that I can think is that he's not a good person, morally speaking.
Yeah, I understand you, and that's very tempting to say that. But in fact, for people to change, reason is not sufficient. The most important factor for people to change is emotion. Unless you don't permit people to put themselves really in the place of animals, you can agree with the best vegan theory. You can understand perfectly veganism. This will enter here and go out here. It's not because he practiced that during 2 years that he understands veganism, because he understands it in his mind, but he not understand it in his heart, in his heart. And that's the point. If you make this person feel what animals go through, he will not put 1 second to change directly. It's all about emotion. If people don't connect at 100% with animals, they will understand what you say, but your word will not have a lasting impact on them. Touch the heart, and they will change forever.
Yeah, I
That's
think
very
you
well
raised
said.
yeah, I think you raise a good point here because even myself, when I reflect on what influenced me to change, I distinctly remember emotion, the feeling that I had when I saw these animals being oppressed and destroyed in these industries for the first time. It hit me right here. It's like you said, the heart, right? And I'm sure Austin can relate to that. So I do think there's merit in what you're saying. This very intelligent, logical person, Austin knew. I do see that that's possibility that he logically understood it, but with logic we can change. Our brains are so powerful, we can spin something in another way to justify a different behavioral route. But when it comes to down here, if veganism, the truth of animal liberation, hits you deeply in the heart and you really feel what these animals are going through, you could never conceive of going back and putting another animal in the gas chamber, in the slaughterhouse, and the racing track, in the zoo ever again. So I do think there is truth to that, and I feel like this is a good segue. Like, Jeremy, what do you think is like good strategies vegans should be using to try to open people's hearts, to get people to reconnect, with the feelings that we all have for animals as children, loving them and being so excited to be around them. Like, what are the strategies that we should use on the streets, on the internet, to get people to reconnect, with those emotions?
The first thing to help people reconnect with animals is the emotion. So we have to touch the heart. So the question is how we can touch the heart of people. The best way to touch the heart, I think, is to go directly inside a slaughterhouse. But you cannot do that. You cannot do that. So how can we do? Well, the best second option is to show them the footage. Whether you are on the street, whether you are in your home with friends, with family, and you invite them to show what happens. They trust you, and you say, I, I just want to show you one thing which is very important, guys. Please watch this with me. This is very important. And they watch, they sit down in the sofa with you, they watch it, and their life will change forever. Unless you have a very big conditioning, it will touch you. It will touch you, and you can never go back after that. So the most powerful thing for me to create a vegan world is to help people reconnect with the emotional part of the animals, what they live. And footage is the best way to do that, actually.
Yeah, so as we round out the episode here, Jeremy, I know you've written several books about veganism and activism. Can you describe them, and what value do you hope to bring with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have write books about veganism and vegan activism. And the whole idea is to help people to understand what veganism really is, and then help people understand how to create a vegan world. This is 10 years that I am working on it, more than 10 years, and everything is inside. So I am really excited to have your feedback, guys, and to have the feedback of everybody inside the vegan movement. These books, there is everything, and it's also for non-vegans also. So this book have the tools, I hope, to help everybody to have the key to use their power to change the world.
So I'm excited to check those books out, Jeremy, and we'll also leave your links in the description so people can get in touch with you, see your vision, see your work. I'm really excited, and it's been a interesting conversation. We went in several directions, kind of opposing views around certain things, but fundamentally we all agree here that animals are not ours to exploit for any reason. Ultimately, sentience is the basic, fundamental trait that we share with all the other earthlings, and that's enough to not exploit them, regardless of these nuanced conversations of certain people being good or bad, or whether it's one person thinks one being is equal this way or not. Like, the fundamental thing we agree on is if you have this subjective experience of life, and you don't deserve to be exploited or dominated for humanity's benefit. So we all agree on that, and I think that's a good way to end the episode. So yeah, thank you guys for checking this one out, and until next time, peace out.
Thank you. Peace.
Thank you very much.